Does cold email work? I mean, we all get them. Like right now, I'm looking at some emails in my email inbox. Some of them I'm probably going to swipe and delete, but there's a few of them that I'm probably going to book appointments with because I'm interested in what they have to offer. And for many of us, email is a critical part of the process. But how do you do effective cold emails right now? Should you keep doing them? All will be answered today in this episode. Check it out. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist, and I'm so excited for another great episode. I am so excited for this episode today, especially I got the one and only Mr. Vin Matano on the podcast. Vin is a social influencer. He shares a lot of great insights, a lot of stuff when it comes towards improving your sales skills, but more so how you can take advantage of social media content and so forth to be able to help establish your brand. You can find out more about Vin by connecting with him here in the show notes. He has a lot of great insights, but he's grown his career as a sales rep, especially his business right now, particularly focusing on cold emails. And he's going to break down his framework of what he uses and how it works. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, know that our show is designed to do two things. One, help you to build pipe, and two, help you to convert that pipe a little bit faster. Today's episode is going to give you some ideas on how you can convert pipeline. Listen to what Vin has to share. See that 4-part framework, test it and apply it, and then come back and let us know. Let's dive in. Vin, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm pumped to have you. I bragged about you a little bit there in a teaser and all the stuff that you're doing because you're killing it. And especially we're pushing people back to your content because you're one of those people just give out tons of good stuff. So we'll link back to that in the show notes here.
Thank you, man.
But, tell us a little bit more about what you do, man. What's your jam?
Well, I spent the last 6 years at a company called Demandbase. Started off as a BDR there. I was there for about 20 months. And I saw a lot of success through cold email outbound. And we could talk a little bit more about that today, but saw a lot of success there, then moved into a closing role and was on the mid-market majors team for the past 4 years. Again, using cold email to source a lot of my own pipeline. And then most recently, I just left Demandbase and jumping into entrepreneurship.
Ooh, all right.
Yes, sir.
Well, we're excited to hear about that, man. Maybe when at the end you can give us some ways that we can connect with you on that.
Yeah.
But cold email, it's something. Is it worth the hype? Is it still working? Everybody is, different opinions on this.
Yeah, I think what's good about sales is like everyone has their own style that works best for them. Like even as an SDR, like I honestly, this is gonna maybe get a lot of people, sales managers mad, but I barely cold called, and I was still like top performer on my team. And I was lucky that I worked in an environment where like my manager and the management team allowed me to just hit my number in the way that I hit it, which was cold email. So for me, it still is my number one channel of generating pipeline, and that's just what works for me, and I double down on it.
That's interesting. And I'm glad, obviously, an environment that you had was like that, was conducive for it, so you can do what you need to do to make that happen. But I would love to hear your secret, though, when it comes to cold email. What are some of the things that works when it comes towards doing effective cold email, or your strategy that you are applying?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different avenues that we can go down.
Sure.
The first would just be like the overall structure of it. The other ones that we can talk about in a little bit is what to put in the email, like how to research it and things like that. But in terms of the structure is something that's very repeatable. I think where a lot of reps struggle with personalized emails is their manager just saying, hey, you guys should do personalized outreach. And then the salesperson gets up, they open their Gmail, and they look at the blank screen and they're like, damn, I have no idea what to write. Like you just get that like brain fog.
Yeah.
And so there is a kind of a 4-part email structure that I've always used. And the first thing is starting off with the observation. So that is the first part of the email structure. So you literally can start it with like, I noticed, I observed, I saw. It's basically based off of something that you've researched, which I'll talk a little bit more about research in just a bit. But basically you want to, Samantha McKenna talks about, show me you know me. So you basically just want to use that first sentence to grab their attention and show them that you're not an automation, you're not AI, you actually are a person that's done their research. The second piece of it is the problem statement. So you have your observation, something you noticed, moving into your problem. Based off of that observation, you know that there are some problems associated with that. For example, I'll use a super easy example. Your observation might be, hey, I noticed you're hiring for SDRs. The problem with that is maybe enabling them, right? So that's your problem statement. The third is your solution. The solution is how you help with that problem statement. So it might be your company's value prop. It might be the services you have. You could definitely throw in a case study or a customer kind of reference point there as well. And then last but not least is your CTA, your call to action. And when I started in sales, and I came from, by the way, before tech, I was doing door-to-door sales, and they had a different opinion on CTAs. We had to close on the spot. We had to be very brash
Yeah.
and a little bit aggressive, to be quite honest with you. In tech sales, actually what performs best is more of a softer approach, using interest-based call to actions. So asking if they're interested to learn more, asking if it's worth the conversation. It's a very soft ask that puts the buyer at ease.
What were you selling door to door, by the way?
I was doing Verizon Fios, which was like internet, TV, and phone packages, and I did that for a summer. And then I did Anderson Renewal by Anderson Windows, which was interesting. And so I went through the gamut.
I did door to door security, Vivint, if you heard about them back in the days.
Yeah. It's a grind, and it's a good way to cut your teeth in sales, and I recommend it for everybody.
For sure. Well, I want to go back to the framework. I like it. Observe, then you come into the problem goes into the solution leads to the call to action. Now, with that, as far as your subject line, what are you seeing that gets that open rate? Because this framework sounds dope, but what is it that's going to get them to get to that point?
Yeah, good point. I mean, you could write an incredible email, but if your subject line is off, they may not even open it. I always go back to using that first sentence, finding something that you can pull from that first sentence and put it as your subject line. So for example,
dope.
Let's go back to the example we talked about earlier. Let's just say your observation was hiring SDRs. I literally would put in a subject line, hiring SDRs. Now, the person receiving that, they might think that it's a candidate applying for the job. They might think it's someone offering to help with it. Like, they don't know what that is, so they have to click it and read more. It's not deceiving. It's relevant to your email as well.
Yeah.
That's what you want to focus on.
And see, that's the critical component that I always go back to. It's like, if there's a way that you can, because that's, if I'm hiring SDR, literally anyone who's hired any role, but specifically SDR, they know that's on their mind for that 6 weeks or whatever, that you eat, sleep, breathing that mess, because you're trying to figure out the hires, you're going through the interview process. So it's highly, highly relevant. And what I love about that example, it's something that I literally will want to get information on. So I like that. And I think that when it goes back to that observation, it shows how good you're observing, right? As opposed to something dumb like recruiting software. It's like, nobody cares about the software. We care about what the software is going to do for me. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And I think what a lot of reps make the mistake too, because I've worked with a lot of reps that are trying to improve their cold email. I think a lot of reps, they try to get too fancy with the subject lines. And really, your subject line should be pretty boring. I mean, most people don't want to be sold to, obviously. That's not new information. So if you let them know that you're a salesperson by putting a salesy, kind of sleazy email, something like, let's just say you help with like growing lead lists. Let's say that's your business, and you put as your subject line, grow lead list by 3x. Man, the prospect will sniff you out in 2 seconds. And so you could change that by just putting lead list as the subject line. It's vague, it's relevant. The point is also, you don't want to deceive them. You don't want to put something random. And then all of a sudden write a different email. So the goal is, you want to make it pretty vague, but also relevant to your email. And that's the good balance that you want to get to.
I've always believed the idea of that first subject line, the subject line and that first paragraph or that first sentence should be in sync, right? Because if it's a promise, I see the subject line as that promise. So in your case, it might be this leadless example, leadless. So if it takes me like, 3-4 sentences to get to the actual punchline, then that's 3-4 sentences is way too long. But I love when you go into observation, you tie right towards that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's copywriting. And Mr. Beast, actually, who is like the number one, I think the number one YouTuber right now.
He is still.
Yeah. So he actually gives some advice to people creating YouTube content. And he says, if the first few seconds of your video does not match your title of your video, you get an instant drop off of retention, because people think they read the description, the title, they want to get that in the first few seconds of the video. Right? If you made a video about, hey, something about working out, and you start off the video of you like cleaning your apartment, you're going to lose retention, because that's not what they came for. So you want to keep the same thought process when you create a subject line. You don't want it to be completely random, because it's personalized and you get a lot of opens, sure, but you want it to be super relevant. That way they read the email and actually respond.
Okay. Now, when it comes to, so we get that, how long are your emails altogether? This is like your first cold outreach.
Yeah. So another thing I think reps get wrong as well is they they just brain dump. They learn a new product and they want to share everything, which is good. But at the same time, it's going to lead to a dramatic drop off in reply rate. So there's a lot of data out there by companies like Lavender and other companies that say the sweet spot is somewhere around, 50 to 100 words. I think 75 is actually the sweet spot. Now, I don't
Yeah.
think that you should be married to that. It's not. I don't think it's a bad email if you have 102 words. It's just a practice to keep in mind when you're writing an email. Reread it out loud multiple times and remove words that are not necessary, that are repetitive. And I'll go as far as even removing, like, for example, let's just use the example we talked about earlier. I noticed you're hiring for SDRs. I might just jump it to say, like, you're hiring for SDRs, or notice you're hiring for SDRs. Just like,
Yeah.
that's how meticulous I will get from removing words from the sentence, from the email.
I wrote a book, and that was one of the first things that I learned when they were teaching me, going back through. I wrote like the first chapter and stuff, and then they came back and they crossed it out, and I'm like, come on, man, I thought about this stuff. But then they're like, you could say that. But when I saw what they did, because you have to accept it, I was like, dang, that is way better. It took like 2 sentences and put it down into like 7 words, and I'm like, sick. Like, so even like the word that, more than, I would probably say 90% of the time, you don't need that word in your vocabulary, like when you're writing something.
Totally. And it's funny too, like at least in the American school system, like when we're learning how to write and writing essays, like we're encouraged to like drag it out and start off with therefore I think that, and it's just like you're trying to get as many words as possible on the paper, and we drag that into our corporate jobs, and then our emails look atrocious, when in reality the email should be the complete opposite. It's like, how can I say what I need to say in the least amount of words possible?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on this. This is fun. So Vin, we do this. I got my email sequence set up. I got like I got this cadence. Sorry, my first email going out. But what about your cadence? I know Sarah Palman. We're talking later today. But one of the things she talks
Tell her
about
I said hi,
was
by the way.
she does a few done. She does a few emails. She doesn't try to overrun her sequence. And I've heard different people with different ideas. You are successful with cold email. What was that cadence like for you, or is like right now?
Yeah, I kind of fall in the same boat. I actually, believe it or not, I actually did not use sequences, which is
No
very,
way.
I don't know if I'd recommend
Straight
that.
Gmail. Straight Gmail.
No, I used Outreach because that's what we had as the ESP
Yeah.
at the company I was working for. But I only used it really to keep track of my emails sent and the open and the engagement, how many opens, were they
Dang.
forwarding it. And I don't know if I'd recommend that, especially to a new rep, to not use
Yeah.
sequences. For me personally, what I was finding was when I was using sequences, I would jump around a lot, and maybe this is just me being unorganized, but my tasks would pile up. And I found myself just, oh man, this thing is, I have to reach out to 50 people. It keeps backing up in my outreach. And then what I was doing was like sending crappy emails to those people because I just wanted them out of my task list.
Yeah.
So, hey, I don't know. Again, I don't know if I'd recommend this for everybody, but for me personally, I literally just went cold turkey, and I was like, let me just try not using sequences. And I basically would track the accounts. I would go really, really focused on, like, let's say 5 or 10 accounts each week as an AE. And I would only focus on those 5 to 10 accounts. So I didn't have to forget. I didn't forget who to reach out to or whatever. I would just focus on those. And it would allow me to do higher quality outreach, maybe take a little bit more time, higher quality outreach. And honestly, I would not go that deep within touch points as well. I think I would try to get a response with the first few touches. And I think the longest I would go, let's say, is maybe 8 touches before I'm like, I want to move on. Or I'll pass over to my SDR to get like some new messaging in front of them.
I like that. It's interesting when you come back and you talk about that concept. I feel like for the more we are doing this thing, we're reverting back to like the old school way of doing stuff, right?
It's funny.
And there's nothing wrong with, like, I'm a big fan of Apollo. Big shout out to Apollo, and in outreach and some of these platforms. But there's something to what you're saying, because I did an episode on lazy selling, and the lazy selling that I found that I've done, just like what you shared, and some of the clients and some of the team members that I had, is just that. Like, I gotta keep up with, Apollo. I have all these reds and I don't like it. The CRM is telling me, and that doesn't equate to effective follow. Like, if you were to, and I know this is on email, but if you were to send a LinkedIn message, in my view, that would be effective if you have good connection with the prospect there, as opposed to just to get a task off of the list by just sending a crappy email.
Yeah, I think for new reps, I think sequences are very helpful because it
Yeah.
does keep you organized, and it allows you to sign on your computer and say, I don't know what to do today. Oh, great. I have these tasks. I
Yeah.
know exactly what to do. For me, honestly, it was more towards the middle or back end of my time at Demandbase, and I found myself the tasks were creating more noise for me, and I found myself it was easier
Yeah.
for me to just cut it off.
What did those look like? Were they all? Was there any framework to those, or was it more like you just felt in the moment from your observation?
Of who to reach out to?
Yeah, sorry, your follow up
Oh,
emails,
follow
and
up.
even though you didn't follow cadence, because you probably
Yeah,
had several, a set amount number of email, probably on average 3, 4 emails.
I absolutely would. So yeah, I definitely would still continue to touch the prospect. I would start off with a highly personalized email. I would spend a lot of time, maybe around 15 minutes or so, researching the account and prospect before sending the first message. That would help
Mhm.
me with the following messages going forward. So I would send a really, really highly personalized message. If I was confident in that message, I would do a triple touch all in one day. So I would send a highly personalized email. I might connect with them on LinkedIn or engage with their content just to get my name in front of them. I might even add in a cold call towards the end of the day just to let them know that I basically had shot them this email regarding X, Y, and Z. And if they were on Twitter and active on Twitter, I even went as far as just tweeting them, not even trying to sell them, but just, again, the practice of getting my face, my name in front of them in as many places as possible. I found, and it's hard to track because they don't talk to one another, but I found it helped increase my response rates on the first few touches of an email. And so I
Yeah,
would do that. And then if I didn't get an answer, I would go back to email and kind of repeat. And if I didn't get a response, but I knew it was a good email, or didn't get an open and knew it was a good email, I would actually send the same email, change the subject line because that means the subject line was off.
yeah,
If they opened it and didn't respond, then my message was off, and then I would go with a different message.
that's dope. I love it. We talked a lot about the framework. We talked a little bit about cadence here when it comes towards effectiveness. Maybe you can give us a motion real quick. We have the last 5 minutes here. Can you run us through one of your most successful cold outreach campaigns that you did an account?
Yeah, by far, I think one of the best things you could do. Luckily, I used to sell to marketers, and they would create a lot of content. The best thing that I would do is reference content that either they were featured in or created, or their executive was either featured in or created in. And so what I would do is I would look up their CMO, or if they were high enough, I would look them up as well to see if they were featured in content. I would pull a clip. Let's say I found them on a podcast. I would pull a little clip from the podcast, mention that in the email. My subject line would be the name of the podcast. And then I would, again, I listen to your podcast. That's the observation. On your podcast, you talked about, I'm making this up,
Yeah, yeah.
targeting accounts, right? And then my solution at Demandbase was helping them target accounts. So that it literally flowed all together. It wasn't random, like, hey, I saw you on a podcast. By the way, you want to buy the solution. And by far, that was like my most successful approach. And whenever I saw a prospect or an executive from a target account on a podcast, like I was like,
You're like, this is it.
yeah, I was like licking my lips, like, okay, this is the one. So by far, that's my favorite.
Oh, dope. Well, this framework is good. Anything else that we need to know that we can help us out as we're starting our cold email outreach?
I would say you're probably overcomplicating it. Make it
Yeah.
super simple. Reread your. I think the first practice you could do is honestly read your email that you're sending currently now, and if it needs to flow. Sometimes they put a random first sentence, a random problem statement, and a random solution. If those two don't talk together, it's a bad email. If they do talk together, my hunch is that it's way too long. That's usually whenever I talk to salespeople, their emails are way, way too long. I would challenge you to look at your email if it's too long. See if you can make two separate emails with the stuff that you've put into one email. I found that people put too much info and they can actually just divide it into just two separate emails. So try that out.
One last thing. What's your feeling on how did you go about multi-threading with this approach?
Well, if you, for example, go back to the podcast example, if let's just say the CMO, I sold this to marketers back in my previous role.
Yeah.
If the CMO was featured on the podcast and she or he talked about X, Y, and Z, I now can send that to multiple stakeholders, and it doesn't look bad. I know a lot of sales reps are scared that they're sending the same message to each person. But what you're doing is you're doing some high level research. You're talking about a problem that your executive team is actually mentioning and experiencing on the podcast, and then how your solution can help. And you can tweak it based on the role. So, like for example, if I sold to a digital marketer, they might care more about the tactical day-to-day stuff. Versus if I was reaching out to a demand gen marketer, I might tweak my value prop a little differently. But at the end of the day, the research I did in the beginning helps with all the rest of the emails. So you may spend a lot of time up front researching for 15 minutes, But then those rest of the emails going to the rest of the team, the multi-threading, those emails, like you could fire those off because you already did a big chunk of the work.
Money in the bank. Vin, if folks want to get connected with you to learn more about you, what's the best place for them to go about doing so? And shameless plug, if you want to, tell us about your business, what you're doing right now.
I think you might be
Mr. Entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think you might be the first person to have on the podcast of the news. I was on
what? I'm breaking this?
Yeah, you might be breaking this, but hopefully it's out by now. By the time this is airing, but basically, where can you find me? You can find me definitely on LinkedIn. You could also find me on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, all places. And that's kind of where that business is going. I'm kind of focusing on the B2B influencer marketing space, so helping brands get started with influencer marketing, helping B2B influencers getting paid, and that's what I'm working on. I would say the best place is either LinkedIn, YouTube, or TikTok.
Dope. Well, congratulations on that, man. We'll look out for that, and we'll put some stuff in the show notes. Yeah. Vin, appreciate you.
Thank you, brother.
Hey, that was Vin Matano. I told you he got some good stuff. That framework, go back to what we talk about, right? We are big believers in that first line, tying back to that subject line. You got to have relevancy. And if you can do this well, it's going to tie back. And I love how he is not like tied to a particular cadence. He follows. And again, we want to make sure in the first part that you're following some kind of process. But as you become mature in your career, as you become confident in your process, you don't have to feel that I'm rigid, that I need to just do all of these follow-ups on the same day. Thank you, Vin. Love this insight. And if you want to check out what he's working on right now, you can find information down in the show notes where you can connect with him on LinkedIn. Tell him that you heard him here on the Sales Evangelist. We're so glad that you got a chance to break that big news with us. And I've been able to collaborate with him on other content. And I'm telling you, dude knows what he's talking about. You can follow him on Insta. You can also follow him on LinkedIn and some of the great places there as well. As always, our sponsors are giving you some amazing offers. They're giving you some amazing deals. I love them. I use them. And I would encourage you to take advantage of them as well. I want you to thrive. I bring on guests like Vin because I want you to succeed. I want you to build that pipe. I want you to have quality opportunities. But most importantly, I want you to earn the business that you deserve and to go out and do big things. See you on the next one.